Yeah, I appreciate the conversation. Hopefully, we can keep it good faith. I did request a moderator. That way, we don't end up speaking past each other or yelling over each other. But perhaps one won't be necessary. We'll see how it goes. Yeah, my name is Andrew Wilson, host of The Crucible. It's the fastest growing debate channel on YouTube, to my knowledge. I'm a blood sports debater. I'm a political analyst and a political satirist. You can catch me on all sorts of different programs, including the Whatever podcast. I'm a regular there, regular to Fresh and Fit, regular to most of the anti-feminist platforms which exist, as is my wife. I understand you have a kind of debate coming up with her as well.
Yes.
God help you on that. But
Yes. So we actually, sorry, I'll just quickly plug that. So next Friday, not this coming Friday, next Friday, me and Isabella Moody will be on The Culture War, hosted by Tim Cass, debating Pearl and Rachel Wilson, your wife, on, I guess, Christianity, marriage, relationships, etc.
yeah, should be interesting. She's the best anti-feminist debater on the internet, so it should be interesting to
Well,
watch how that goes.
I'm interested in that because I follow your wife on X, Rachel. I think it's Rach for Patriarchy. If you guys don't follow her, I quite like her accounts. I have not seen very many things where I disagree with her on, and it's interesting because I feel like some of the things that Pearl says, I'm surprised that your wife would be in alignment with them. But I guess the four of us on that show can discuss that then and there. But for now, I think one of the things that would probably be a good place to start, as we discussed before we started going live, is what exactly these terms mean. When people call someone a feminist, or we talk about feminism, what is that? What
Yeah.
is the red
So
pill?
what is feminism to you and the red pill to you?
So, broadly, feminism, they say like, oh, it's just equality between men and women in the legal sense, I think is where it started off. But if we look at the modern feminist movement, I think there's not only the push for equality before the law for men and women, but also equity in basically every domain, whether that's political, economic, social. And also, we see a concurrent push to, I guess, derail family structures, whether that be, like the extended family, nuclear family, you name it. Feminism has done a lot more than just push for like equity. And we also see it overlapping with, I guess, intersectionalism a lot. It's very rare nowadays that you see a feminist who is not also talking about things like white privilege, straight privilege, you name it. So overall, it's a leftist ideology, and
It
yeah, I
sounds
guess
to
that would
me
be.
like you're conflating wokeism with feminism. Feminism is a rejection of patriarchy. That's all it is. The entailment of egalitarianism between men and women is a rejection of patriarchy. Who's the oppressor if you're trying to be equal with the opposite sex? Who would the oppressor be? What is the entailment there? The entailment would be men, or the oppressors. So it's a movement to reject patriarchal structures. That's what feminism is.
I would say it goes. So I don't necessarily disagree with that, but I would say if we're looking at the feminist movement and my problems with it, it extends a lot beyond just that.
Yeah, but I think it's because you conflate wokeism with feminism. Feminism is simply put a rejection of patriarchal structures. That's it. The entirety of feminist ideology is to move away. So if you're thinking about things like the destruction of the nuclear family, this type of thing, the nuclear family has a head. The head is the man. If you have the extended cross generational family, that's also a patriarchal system. The head is the man. If you're talking about the dismantling of the church is patriarchal. Christianity is a patriarchal structure. It's the rejection of patriarchy across the board. The entire movement of feminism has nothing to do with egalitarianism at all. It has to do with dismantling patriarchy. That is what the ultimate goal is.
Well, again, I think when it comes to things like egalitarianism, that is not how I would define the modern feminist movement. But I think we're kind of seeing like we're splitting hairs here to a certain extent
I don't
as
think that
to.
we're making a semantic distinction with no merit. The semantics matter, especially when we're talking about these types of issues. So wokeism itself can be a leftist progressive ideology. That's true. However, when you're talking about things absent a rejection of patriarchy, the right wing can be just as guilty of those things. So you can still be
But I mean,
somebody
if
who's
we look at the modern feminist, or sorry, the current push toward things like, let's just say, allowing men in women's spaces if they identify as trans, would you see that as a feminist problem or as a woke problem?
I would see that particular issue is a feminist issue. The problem
But how is
is
that a rejection of patriarchy
because,
if we're talking
well, I'll
about the
explain it to you.
recognition?
So, what happens here is that women have gone ahead and voted to allow these things to push through. The reason that this is a movement against patriarchal structures is because men and their sports are really the only sports that matter. Nobody watches women's sports at all. They just don't even bother with it, and I don't blame them for not bothering with it. It's boring as hell. Women have decided to use the power of the vote to institute these policies, and I say let them suffer by those policies that they have instituted. I have no problem with men going in to these women's spaces, for instance, and beating the shit out of all their records and completely dismantling them. What the hell do I care about women's sports for? They voted for this shit. They can deal with it.
I mean, I don't disagree with that, but if we look at the belief that, for example, gender is not something based on sex or chromosomes, but that it is a social construct and therefore open to self-identification, I think it goes a little bit deeper than just the rejection of
Gender
male.
is a social construction. It does not exist inside of objective reality. It's a made-up term utilized by woke leftist scumbags. It has nothing to do with objective reality. All that exists is biological sex. The norms which come with biological sex are intrinsic to the ontology of human beings.
All right. So do you view again, you can call it woke or feminist, do you view the belief that we see basically in all matters of the world, whether that's like sports, we also see it, I mean, even in terms like medicine, it's being conflated. Do you think that that is something that feminists have pushed for, the conflation of biological sex with gender? Do you think that feminism at its core?
Yes, because it assists with trying to destroy the ontology of what is man. So it's an attempt to rip a fabric in the whole of truth of what is man. So yes, it is a pushed feminist. That's why you see the infighting in the feminist crowd from those who try to move over into a more conservative camp, like Rowling or J.K. Rowling, for instance, who says no. We fought for women's liberation. This was not what that was supposed to be. But an entailment of the dismantling of patriarchy is that men can no longer protect you from yourself. And that is why patriarchy is so important, is we also protect women not just from external forces, but protect them from their own choices. And in this particular case, feminism, the dismantling of patriarchal systems, blurring the line between what is a man and a woman, has long been a feminist doctrine.
Okay, I mean, I don't disagree with you there, but we can move on. Okay,
I would like to
about...
not move on. I would like to pin some more down here so that we can get this straight. So, when you're talking about gender, I don't really understand why you think that this is something other than a social construction. It does not exist. It can't be touched. It can't be tasted. It can't be seen. It definitely does not exist as a reality absent the mind. Why do you think that gender exists absent the mind? Why isn't there only sex?
I don't think that gender is distinguishable from sex. And for the longest time, those terms were used basically synonymously.
Yeah, I agree that people use them interchangeably. But the reason that feminist ideology pushes the trans ideology specifically is because it dismantles ontologically what is a man. That's what it does. That's what the point is of feminism, is to dismantle patriarchal systems. It has nothing to do with anything else. It's always been a dismantling of patriarchal systems. It may sound simplistic, but actually the conflation with woke does more damage. So if you conflate feminism with wokeism, it does more damage to the message than just explaining that patriarchal systems are necessary. And that is what the fight is really about. The fight is about a patriarchy versus a non-patriarchal society. Very simple.
Well, I mean, in that point, though, I feel like you would be making many people feminists who not only don't support the modern feminist movement, but who might actually be considered, I mean, broadly speaking, allies in any type of policy you would try to...
Then they're not allies.
Sorry?
Then they're not allies. They're trying to dismantle patriarchal systems. They're not allies to the right. The Christian right is based around patriarchy. Christianity is a patriarchal system. It's a top-down patriarchal system. Your job as a wife, for instance, is to submit to your husband as you would unto the Lord. You can find this in Ephesians 22, right? The submission to him as unto the Lord. Your husband is submitting to the hierarchical church authority. This is all patriarchal, top-down patriarchy. Same thing within governance. It was always supposed to be top-down patriarchy. This was never supposed to be a system which integrated women into positions of authority and power. That's insanity. And feminism is simply a push to dismantle patriarchal systems.
So if someone were to, let's say, argue for equal protection under the law, would you consider them a feminist between like men and women?
No, but I'm not really sure what that has to do with anything. So if you're asking for equal protection,
when you talk about the, I guess, abolition of patriarchy, some people might say that, well, if you, for example, believe in, I don't know, women having inheritance rights, is that feminism?
Women have always had inheritance rights.
Well, but so you don't think that demolishing that would be a feminist standpoint?
No, it's always been so. So
no, I'm not asking whether it's always been something, but it's just like at its core.
Yeah, but I'm trying to get to the ought portion of the claim. So you're asking, ought this be true? But I'm trying to define what is the truth. So the truth is that when you're talking about female inheritance, right, that has always been the case that women could inherit. They could inherit property. They could inherit all of these things. It's actually a feminist talking point that they could not. When it comes to ought they be able to do that under a patriarchal structure? They ought to be able to, yes. And there's always been a prescription so that they could.
Okay. What about something like women in the workplace?
Yeah, it's a bad idea. Now, women have always been allowed to work, and women ought to always be allowed to work. However, the incentives which are produced by the United States government are supposed to be for the health and the welfare of the nation. If you're talking about the health and welfare of the nation, then you want to push policy which will allow women to stay at home with their children, which is going to be the best setup possible. But again, this would be a pro-patriarchy position because you'd be allowing men at that point and incentivizing men to be the head of the household, the head of the family, to be the breadwinner. In this case, this would be considered oppressive from the feminist ethos.
So in terms of prescription versus description, then if we talk about patriarchy, do you think that is it a feminist talking point? Is it a feminist policy to have egalitarian laws in regard to things like voting?
Yeah.
Like I'm of the belief that
all
for example,
egalitarianism, which is moved from women's movements, are always designed for a liberation from patriarchy. All. There's not any that are not. Anytime women collectively are pushing towards any type of what is considered egalitarianism, it is feminism. It is a dismantling of patriarchal structures and systems, period.
Okay, so the reason why I bring that up is because when it comes to, let's say, something like voting, right? So I'm not a fan of universal suffrage. I've talked about this on my channel. I'm in favor of I think there's several different systems that could work. Maybe one vote per household with children and a married couple, service through citizenship, net taxpayers, property owners, you name it. If I believe that men and women would equally have the ability to earn that right, though in practice it would be overwhelmingly male. We know that from stats right now as to who exactly pays the most taxes and owns the most property. Would that be a feminist perspective that I have?
If the movement of that was not the end goal to make it patriarchal, then yes, it would be a feminist position, which is why I say that you're a feminist.
Is the intent, the intent matters more than, I guess, the outcome in that regard?
Well, no, the outcome matters more than the intent. The outcome is for patriarchy. That is the outcome we're looking for, is for a
the outcome would be system. More patriarchal than what we have currently.
Yeah, but the entailment is it also may not be. It depends on which system. You haven't exactly defined which system you would implement in order to make sure that it's patriarchal. You just said there are many we could choose from. Well, that's great. That's swell, but it doesn't actually tell me anything. So no, the outcome, the outcome
that I just mentioned would have more women earning the franchise.
Well, you would have to be specific. What system are you advocating for here?
If it were net taxpayers or property owners, both of those groups are overwhelmingly male. Households, well, it's one vote for household. The only one where there would be some ambiguity perhaps would be service through citizenship. But if we look at military service, that's also overwhelmingly male.
Yeah, I agree. But is the point of this ultimately, from your perspective, to make a better governing body? Or is the point of this ultimately for you to advance a patriarchal structure inside of society? This is the distinction I'm asking.
I don't think you can divorce those two things.
Yeah, I think
to be better,
I think
it will
you
be
can.
more male dominated.
Well, can you just answer the question? Are you trying to advocate for a patriarchal society, or aren't you?
I'm trying to advocate for a better society that is.
That's not my question. That's not my question. Answer my 100%. Question. Don't be bad faith. Do you want a patriarchal society, or don't you?
If that patriarchal is one led by men, then yes, this would be led by men. It would be better.
Yeah. So ultimately, your goal is the advocation of a patriarchal society, correct?
Correct.
Okay. If that is the ultimate goal, then no, that is not feminism. But I wanted to make sure, as we dove into this, that that's actually what the goal is. Because what it sounded like to me is, no, I want a better society. I want a more gooder society. I want something that looks and acts like in some way that I want. That really has nothing to do with anything. I want to know specifically if you have feminist ideals or you do not have feminist ideals.
But I suppose that I don't have feminist ideals, but the reason why I talk about all of those things, because I don't think it's an argument where it's men, therefore better. I think that's an oversimplification. I think, yeah, if we look at all the different strengths that men versus women have, it's not just that they're men. And I think kind of just trying to oversimplify it in those ways, you're going to lose a lot of people who...
Well, I think making it overly complex actually makes us lose far more people. So just because you take
have you heard of peaceful Latinas?
Yeah, they're idiots. But just because you
but they're actually someone who agree with my position. But
that's nice. They're a bunch of liberal scumbags. They're a couple of liberal scumbags.
They agree with my position. But when it's marketed as, just repeal the 19th, like their brain shuts off.
Oh, yay. Progressives agree with your position. Awesome. That's great. Swell.
Yeah, we live in a society where we must.
Did you just use the "we live in a society"?
We must be able to persuade.
You don't persuade the devil by dancing with him. The devil persuades you. That's how that ends up working. So what happens is by you moving off the message. Let me finish my point.
You're one of the biggest debate channels you just said.
Let me finish my point. Yeah, their ideology can be challenged in a debate channel. That's true. That's not me dancing with them politically and saying, "Oh, you happen to agree with my policy prescription, so that makes them good." That's absurd. It doesn't make them good. Dancing with a bunch of progressives like Destiny and the rest of these coomers and acting like they're on your team because they agree with certain issues is absurd. These people are fucking horrible. They're horrible people. They do horrible things. And for us to make these kinds of like bizarre advocations that, the concept is so complex, the average Joe could just never really understand it. There's so much nuance. There's not really that much nuance. It's not really that. It's not really that complex.
People absolutely can understand it, but we have to take the time to explain it first before they do.
Yeah, and that's exactly what I do. That's what debate does. Debate helps flesh out these ideas and these ideologies so that people can understand it. But these people are not our friends. They're not our buddies. They're not our pals. They absolutely want to dismantle the society in which we live. And they're pretty awful. So no, I don't care what progressives might agree with your positions.
Yeah, but it goes to show that the positions themselves are sound, and they're sound to the point where you might even be able to implement.
No, it doesn't show that it's sound just because some people agree with them. That's an absurd statement.
I mean, if you agree that it's not a bad system, and or at the very least not a feminist system, I'll be clear there. And you even have like some progressives getting on board with the idea. I don't think that's something to scoff at, and I think we're being needlessly. I don't want to say condescending, but I mean a little bit there.
Well, good. We need to gatekeep more. We need to make sure that we're not letting in the most horrifying people on planet Earth so that we can advocate for a system which they will then corrupt. That's how progressive communism got power to begin with.
What are you talking about letting into?
I'm saying that what ends up happening is this. It's the curious case of Charlie Kirk and Con Inc. It's the same exact thing. What happens is you create big tent ideology around something which is hyper specific, and then the people who you bring in begin to pollute the message. In Charlie Kirk's case, it was the LGBTQ who he wanted to come in to add to the big tent style messaging that he had for his brand of conservatism. The same exact thing can happen within whatever ideology you're advocating for. The more horrific and horrible people you bring in to advocate for that ideology, the more they're going to end up polluting it. That's how it works in real time. That's how politics operates. That's how lobbyists begin to gain control of messaging, and how they end up completely destroying what the message originally was.
So I think you're getting to the core of something that we did try in the conservative movement. That's the issue of big tent conservatism. Like, we want LGBT people voting Republican. We want all of these votes, right? And I think we should be able to work together where we have agreements. That's true. But the problem is, and we see this even in the media, when you're too willing to, I guess, go along to get along, you not only end up working together where you have agreement, which is just strategic in my opinion,
what in
but
the name
the
of
movement
hypocrisy
itself, the
is this?
window changes.
Why say this when you just got done saying, oh, but there's progressives who agree with me, and now you're kind of moving out of the other side of your face and saying, oh,
yeah, but I
but
don't
the
think,
thing
I don't
is, it's
think
like, I don't think that that's
progressives-
necessarily a good thing. It's like, get
Hang
off the
on,
fence
hang
and
on
pick a
second.
position.
Wait. I don't think it's a bad thing if progressives also support me, but I think what's bad is where we start to say that just because you agree with this one position, you are now conservative. You're part of the new right that is inclusive. There's a big difference there. There's a very, very
What's
big
the
difference
distinction?
there. The distinction is, well, we're not going to, just because you agree with me on one of these issues, that doesn't mean I'm going to compromise my position on all these other issues.
That was Charlie Kirk's position. I disagree with the fact that you're LGBTQ, but as long as you're voting with me, everything's A-okay. No. What happens is it pollutes.
There wasn't.
What happened is they polluted that message and absolutely destroyed it. Charlie Kirk and TPUSA have had to back up on all of their messaging, everything from immigration to LGBTQ rights. Fortunately, there was a basically fatwa that was put up against them by one Mr. Can't even be named on the internet, who completely dismantled that messaging before the poison got too out of hand. But that's exactly what was going on, was an inclusion of these lunatics inside of the conservative movement, which pollute the message. That's why Donald Trump now has rainbow flags all over the place.
Which I think is a
You want
pretty
secularists to
important one.
continue to reproduce? That seems like a good idea to you?
Yes, I think even if you are not Christian, you probably should have kids. We're at a point that
Is their marriage valid if it's a secularist marriage to begin with, Lauren?
valid. No.
No. So then you're
we can
basically
talk
telling
about-
them to sin, right, Lauren? Aren't you telling them to sin by telling them to get a non-Christian marriage and have children? Aren't you telling them to sin, Lauren?
Okay, this is, yeah.
What's that? Yes? Yes, you're telling
Yeah,
so you're telling people to sin, Lauren? That's your prescription? The whole time you've been beating the holy hell out of the red pillars, and the entire time they've been right, and you've been telling them to sin, Lauren?
So hang on, let's
Answer the question,
I'm happy
Lauren.
To admit where I'm happy to admit where I'm wrong. This is not a problem for me. Let's talk about this. So, do you believe that it is sinful for a man to get married and have kids if he is not a Christian?
That's not marriage. Marriage is a sacrament between a man and a woman. That's within the purview of the Christian ethic. You have been running around with the rest of the tradcons telling men to sin, Lauren. Why are you doing that? Why? Now answer my question. Why are you doing that, Lauren?
Well, I think you're illustrating something, and again, you're getting upset with me here, but I'm happy to hear if I'm wrong, and we can talk about this. But I mean, it is true. I have argued for like a civil marriage, even within, if you're going to have kids as a man, even if you're not religious, cohabitation does not have the same outcomes as a civil marriage. That is true. There is still a difference between,
and it's all sinful, right, Lauren?
Yes, I think
then
that.
Then why are you advocating that people sin? Answer my question.
I guess I would. That's true. That's true. I guess my argument should be first for people to.
And now you know why I think you're a feminist, Lauren. Now you know.
Because of the marriage thing?
Because you go out of your way. You haven't thought these positions. The problem is when you lift these positions from people and you haven't actually thought about them, you end up being at the mercy of them. The reason I engage so much with these red pillars, the reason I engage so much with them, so that I actually understand their positions. The reason that I engage so much with the Christian sphere is so that I can really understand the positions. You don't have a good understanding or grasp on these positions. And it's covert feminism. What ends up happening ultimately, because you haven't thought these through, is you end up advocating for things like this, which are literally sinful, and you don't even know you're advocating for them.
No, I think you're right on and I will cede that. But I think when it comes to like the voting thing, I don't think it's fair to say that I haven't considered it. I think this is a good illustration of you're right here when it comes to advocating for secular marriage. I think I can simultaneously acknowledge that a secular marriage still has better outcomes for those involved and any children involved than something like cohabitation.
Oh, you're a Christian. You're not a consequentialist. You're not looking for outcomes. You're not looking for outcomes.
Let me finish. But then also recognize that by my own standard, that is not a marriage and is therefore sinful.
So that would be a contradiction, a performative contradiction.
I don't think it would be performative. I think it would be but it's not just for performance though. If you're actually like,
yes, it is for performance. The performance of X action leads to contradiction. It's a performative contradiction in your worldview. Literally.
It is a contradiction of my worldview, but I wouldn't say it's performative. I'm not doing it for an audience.
Okay, fine. We won't make the semantic too detailed, but it's a contradiction. Fine, as long as you concede that is contradictory inside of your worldview. But let's go even deeper. Let's go even deeper into it, so that you understand even more. Okay, where these guys are coming from. Why in the world?
Sorry. Could we just stop for a second because we dove into what feminism is. I want to dive into what red pill is. First, though, I do need to get these chats up. Okay, Arsion says, I think feminism was designed as anti-patriarchy, but in practice, those who believe in it actually do care about egalitarianism. At least some do. The McClone Code says, gender exists only if you think of it as the typical expected expressions, physical and behavioral, of each sex, and there's only two one-to-one map. The Sarcastic Saint says, Laura, please forgive Andrew because he hasn't been laid and the whatever podcasts get to him. He just needs to take a cold shower. And okay, well, that's... Arsion says, it's not the devil you're persuading, it's people. Arsion says, Christ forgave and spent time with a prostitute. Lauren, if you can debate Rollo Tomasi next live, I will not need anything for Christmas. Okay, thank you guys. I think we're all cut up there. Okay, so let's talk about what the red pill is and what I view as the problems with red pill. So I view the red pill as kind of an offshoot or something that developed from maybe earlier MGTOW or manosphere types. So a lot of the complaints center around inequality before the courts and family law specifically benefiting women. I don't disagree there, but you mentioned yourself that they can be degenerate. And when I look at someone like the Fresh and Fit guys, who do talk about, like, they encourage promiscuity among men, that's not something that I support.
Yeah, but again, this is a detailed problem with your worldview. So let me dive right into this as well. These are secularists, and these secularist men are trying to help secularist men. The Christians are supposed to be coming in with solutions to these issues, and what happens is, like you, they have actual contradictions inside of their worldview, so these guys don't want to listen to them. What you guys say is, oh, hey, just roll the dice, and hopefully you'll get lucky, and maybe you won't marry one of these horrible women. What is the actual Christian prescription? So then tell me, Lauren, what is the actual Christian prescription to hypergamy in society from women and mate selection? What is the actual solution that you have from a Christian ethic that you can give these guys that's better than what Fresh and Fit gives them?
I don't have a problem with hypergamy.
Yeah, that's not my question. My question is, if you believe in monogamy because you're a Christian, but women are not acting in a monogamous way inside society, which they're not, what is the prescription that you're going to give to men? There's not enough women to go around who are virtuous for the virtuous men. What prescription are you going to give to the secularists? Do you even have one? You don't have one, right?
Well, no, I think the solution is to do things like change family court, like absolutely change the law surrounding divorce. I think a lot of men, even if they are secularists, would feel better going into a marriage if they didn't think that there was such a good chance that they absolutely lose everything in the divorce. And I also think that you say that there's not enough good women to go around. I think that's true. And in my video talking about the women and the right, I believe a lot of this stems from a lack of leadership from men in the church. I think there should be a lot of churches, they prioritize gynocentrism, female sensibilities over actual male leadership. And I think that's a problem. And I think if we were to let the
this
church
doesn't answer the question.
Way,
what is the actual prescription that you can give to men right now who are facing down the barrel of marriage, right? Where you have a state contract in a secular way. These guys are speaking to secular men. You're the Christian who's trying to convert them. What's the actual prescription that you're going to give these guys when it comes to marriage? What is it, Lauren?
Well, I think you pointed out that any prescription when it comes to marriage, if you're talking to a secularist, should be to follow Christ, because anything less than that is not a marriage.
Oh, and they go, yeah, but I don't want to do that. What I'm going to do instead is I'm just going to, have sex with a bunch of hot chicks and then never tie myself down with the state. That makes a lot more sense. Can you actually tell me why that's illogical from a secular progressive state? I can't actually think of how it's illogical for a man who's a secularist to say, I don't want to get married in the current sphere. The women are not virtuous. And instead, I'm just going to go out and I'm going to have tons and tons of sex. And that's it. Why is that actually problematic from that stance? Doesn't it seem like it's good advice for fresh and...
If your problem with women is that too many of them have slept around, etc., then I don't think you need to be a Christian to recognize that by continuing to sleep with these women, you are exacerbating the problem. Unless you're...
Nope, that would be contrary to hypergamy. Hypergamy is actually stating the opposite within the red pill thought process. They're actually stating the opposite, that most men cannot sleep with X amount of women. Most of them cannot. Most women can sleep with whatever guy they want. Most guys cannot sleep with whatever woman they want. So it would actually be the opposite within their sphere. So they're telling men, actually, you're probably not going to be able to do this thing. However, here's self-improvement you can do, which would improve your chances of mate selection and things like this. From a secular standpoint, how in the world could they possibly be wrong? What are you offering? This is the question. What are you offering from the Christian church, from the Christian perspective, to combat these ideas, Lauren? What are you actually showing them?
Well, once more, you talk about the fact that, well, they're offering self-improvement so that men can improve their chances for mate selection. I will maintain, if you are a man who believes that promiscuity amongst women, sleeping with men who they are not married to, is a problem, you cannot engage in that same behavior while complaining about the problem. You are exacerbating the problem.
Yeah, but most of those men are not exacerbating the problem. This is not a male problem. This would be a woman problem when it comes to hypergamy. If most of the women are sleeping with a select few men, how's that a man's issue? That would be a woman's issue. And again, you still have not answered the question from the church, from the Christian perspective. What would you do to solve that?
Well, I think what we need to do to solve that is when it comes to things like, sex outside of wedlock, as a church, we have fault, like the Christian church has failed in enforcing those moral standards. I mean, and it's true. How many, if you think about like church singles groups or even just general services, how many of them talk about something like sex within marriage specifically? It's not a popular concept. It's not something that I think a lot of church leaders, quote, think is a winning topic. But because of that, even amongst people within the church, like that's a problem.
Okay. Well, here, I'll give you this solution, because that's a non-solution. That's just literally prattle. You didn't say anything. Here's the actual solution.
I'll let you continue. But
go ahead.
What I've said there is that the church should absolutely be pushing to enforce those moral standards, preaching those moral standards.
Which church?
Christian churches, like the church is the body of Christ.
Yeah, but the problem is that within Protestantism, you have so many different denominations, so many of them which embrace feminism, LGBTQ, this type of thing. They have no unified message. Only the traditional churches, Orthodoxy and Catholicism, do. That's it. That's why the Muslims have become so popular where they're at when they're pushing traditional values. That's the reason why. So I can tell you how you can actually make a lifeline to these guys if you actually want to bring them over to your side. If you really want to understand how you can fix this problem, You fix the problem with a move to patriarchy. That's the thing red pillars will embrace, a move to patriarchal systems. That's what Christianity can offer to the secularists, which bring them over to our side, a move to patriarchy. Because absent patriarchy, what has happened...
Churches need to embrace that.
Yeah, but they have no ecclesiastical authority. Because there's no ecclesiology, they can't do it. Protestant churches can't do it. They don't have the necessary ecclesiology in order to move into a patriarchal system. They don't have any reference for marriage. They don't have any laws or bylaws regarding marriage. They have no laws or bylaws regarding anything, whereas the traditional churches do have that ecclesiastical authority. That's why the traditional Abrahamic religions do so well, and why Protestantism does not do so well. And so hang on, I'm almost done. When you're making the advocation for this, the reason that you have a pro-feminist stance without even knowing it is because if you want to solve the problem on the red pill side and the Christ pill side, the one unifier that you have is a patriarchy, patriarchal systems. They will agree with that, and you can move them out of that. But just telling them, oh no, just be monogamous, that doesn't do anything for them, because who are the women left? They get the leftovers to be monogamous with. That's what they get.
All right, well, I mean... When it comes to things like divorce within the Catholic Church, at least if we're going with nominal Catholics, it is still high, unfortunately.
Depends on the country. That's one. Yeah, and there's influencers which happen inside of Western nations, especially due to feminism. In Orthodoxy, the rates are very, very, very low. Also, Orthodoxy offers the ecclesiastical authority and the requisite to get married outside of the state. It's not a requirement because these are sacraments. These are messages which you can give to actual red pillars to move them over to Christ. What you can't tell them to do, though, is, hey, take the big risk and the big gamble because Jesus would really like it if you did. That's insane messaging.
That's not my position, by the way, to take the risk and the gamble, to just roll the dice. I absolutely don't think that's a good idea for men to do. And I think that there are definitely things that you can do that would reduce your likelihood of getting divorced. I don't think you should just roll the dice. Absolutely not.
Well, then what is your prescription other than a move to patriarchy?
I don't think a move to patriarchy is not part of that answer. Again, I said that even in regard to the church. But I also think that there are certain mate selections that you can do that do have a statistical likelihood at reducing your chances of divorce, right? Socioeconomic status of married couples has an outcome. It affects your likeliness of divorce.
Yeah, but it also affects the outcome of you having children because you have them later in life because of family planning. And so what ends up happening is it's the poor and the downtrodden and those who reject materialism who are going to inherit the earth because they're the only ones who are breeding. It's actually bad advice to tell people to wait until later in life to get married because you're going to destroy the chance of them having more children.
I'm not telling people to wait later in life to get married, but I think there's sometimes the willingness to believe that there is one likelihood of divorce and that it's a roll of the dice no matter what the circumstances are, which is patently not true. And there's a big differential, even if you look at between different races, of the likelihood of divorce. The black divorce rate, I think,
that's because different races embrace different types of ecclesiastical authority inside of their churches. Namely, some of them have none. And that's why when the church effectively had some sort of body to it inside of black communities, you did not see these divorce rates nearly as high because they had a more traditional foundation for what it was that they were going for. That's all destroyed. But when you're talking about the entailment of what you just said, though, of, hey, your likelihood for divorce drastically is going to reduce if you have, these different socioeconomic statuses. An entailment of that is going to be that they wait till later to get married. That, in turn, is going to cause us to have less children, which exacerbates the birth rate crisis. These, again, not a great position.
Well, the thing is, when people look at the likelihood of divorce dropping, we're basically talking about IQ here, and bell curve talks about this. Your likelihood of getting divorced is greatly higher if your IQ is lower, and socioeconomic status is kind of like it represents that. And so, if you are a man, absolutely trying to find a woman who is not low IQ, therefore has better impulse control, it is going to reduce your likelihood of getting a divorce. Now, does that simultaneously mean that you have to wait until you're 30 to get married and maybe 35 to have kids? No, I think those are two different things.
The high IQ people are not having children.
Yeah, which is a problem. And I want them to have children.
Yeah, but if you want them to have children, then you have to embrace patriarchy, because we want the smart mothers to stay at home and raise their children. We don't want them in the workforce literally frying their brains on behalf of their boss. We want the really high IQ women. We want the really high IQ women at home raising children to make the next generation of high IQ children. Otherwise, they're wasted. They're wasted in the marketplace. Move to patriarchy is the only answer to this. That's the only way that this can actually be done in a structured way. You can't incentivize them with money. There's no way to incentivize people with money to have children. The poorest among us are the ones who have the children now. So financial incentives are not going to work for this.
I've long said the idea that the reason why women aren't having children is because of costs is ridiculous. And it's not just the poor in this country who have more children than the rich, but also if we look at a global scale, the places where there's the least economic development, they tend to have the most. It is absolutely a choice that people are making. Now, does that simultaneously mean that I don't think concerns over affordability are, we shouldn't talk about them? No, but I don't think that is the core issue of why
that's a materialist position. It's a materialist position. You having a family should not have anything to do with materialism. It should have to do with the relationship and the sacrament between yourself and Jesus Christ, in the submission of your wife to your patriarchal authority and your ability to raise children, even in meager settings. Some of the best people come out of the worst poverty situations. It's not a bar for having a family. The messaging that can come from Christianity only can cross this threshold and Rubicon with the red pill if we have an embrace of patriarchy. That's it. It's the only way. I still haven't actually heard any descriptors of the red pill that you disagree with. What are they?
Well, I told you it's the push for the promiscuity, because we also have an overlap with what seems to be the pickup artist mentality, where we have people like Fresh and Fit going on sugar baby sites, right, and sleeping with all of these women.
Yeah, the push towards promiscuity is something which I push back on more than most. But that's not red pill. Just because you're a pickup artist, think of the red pill as a data packet. Inside of the data packet is a ton of information. You can utilize it how you see fit. Can you utilize it for the purposes of nefarious manipulation? Yes. Can you also utilize it for the purposes of help building men up and men's advocacy? Yes. You can't lay at the feet of the red pill the fact that some pickup artists and some people push towards promiscuity. That's not a red pill ideology. Red pill is simply information. That's it. It's descriptive truths which are given out into the ethos, and you can do what you want with those descriptive truths. I've not actually ever heard, and I've been on Fresh and Fit, and I have tangled with Myron on this, and he has told me to my face, yes, it's degenerate behavior. Yes, promiscuity is bad. Yes, promiscuity should be rejected if we had a moral society. Andrew, what are Christians going to do to reach out in order to make sure we have a moral society again? In this case, when I ask you, right, you are telling the degens to get married, which is insane, right?
That's not my prescription to have a more moral society, is to just get married. That's absolutely not it.
It was it. I caught you in a contradiction on it already. That you're advocating as bad a sin as they are. What is the distinction between them saying go have sex unmarried with a bunch of people and you saying no, get married secularly, absent a sacrament? You're both advocating for the same exact thing, Lauren.
It's not the same exact thing. Even if we just look at the consequentialist, and again, I think you're right. Actually,
you're not a consequentialist. You're a Christian.
But if we look at the outcomes, you can't say that the outcome is the same where you're sleeping with one person for the rest of your life versus you're sleeping with all of these other people. That's actually not the same. It's not
wait.
In terms of the outcome.
But it's still degeneracy on both sides. If they're getting married absent a sacrament, right, they're still degenerates. And if they're promiscuous, they're still degenerates. You're both advocating for degeneracy. You're both just doing it in different ways. And that's why guys like me exist, to push back on these ideologies, because it's nuts. It's actually
Well, I
crazy.
think again, I will say you're right about the civil marriage thing, and I will thank you for elucidating that for me. That's totally fine. But I think even if we look at purely from a secular standpoint, with the acknowledgement that a civil marriage is not a sacramental marriage, and therefore is sinful. If we look at the outcomes of things like promiscuity involving multiple partners, then we have children being born out of wedlock.
You
To
still have them
parents
being
who are
born out of wedlock. Your prescription also would have children being born out of wedlock.
Yeah, but to multiple baby mamas and things like that,
Well,
which is objectively worse.
okay, so now you're consequentialist
Poverty,
again. Now you're consequentialist
hang on.
again.
And if we look at the outcomes like poverty, think like abuse, there is a difference between a secular married couple versus just sleeping with a bunch of women. There's a difference.
Okay. So just to get this right, I get it. You're advocating for degeneracy light. Got it. Like, does that I don't know how that makes it better that you advocate for degeneracy light
I'm not
instead of
advocating, you're right, I'm not
tons of
advocating
degeneracy
for that marriage in the first place, but I can still recognize that the outcomes are different, and one is measurably worse than the other.
Yeah, but the
100%
outcomes, you're not a consequentialist. Christians don't follow consequentialism. While it's true we can look at outcomes, you're supposed to be following virtues and the teachings of Jesus Christ, not of what the consequences of your higher duties are. If you were a consequentialist and a Christian, that would be absent the Christian ethic and the Christian ethos, period. And it doesn't even follow with the logos. None of this follows, Lauren. None of it follows.
But so you're saying that these red pill men are secular, therefore we have to speak to them in terms of a secular language, what the pros and the cons are. There is still a secular argument to be made for why you should not be sleeping with a bunch of women, like one night stands and pickup artist style. There's still a secular argument to be made
you can
for
make that.
society why
Yes,
that is worse.
you can make that secular argument, but here's the thing: it's not enough to destroy their worldview if you can't offer them one that's better. And what they hear is hypocrisy, and what they hear is nonsense. What they hear is you saying, hey, the best thing that you can do is get married, in spite of the fact that my values say that you're not even really married. That these are insane positions which are put together in order to attack the red pill who's just trying to give descriptive truths. I'm not saying that their prescriptions are great. That's where you get into some of the pickup artist stuff. Most of them don't make prescriptions, though. Rollo calls it a praxeology. It's not, but he calls it a praxeology. These different people have different names for it, but they're just trying to give descriptive claims for how the world actually works. And all I see is you beating the hell out of them and kissing the ass of former prostitutes like Nala and kissing the ass of all of these women and saying, how dare you? How dare you, Pearl Davis? How dare you, Andrew Wilson, say that you think that, oh, I don't know, maybe this chick who had sex with hundreds of men on film has done absolutely nothing to show the fruits or in any way really repent or show any remorse for this. How dare you not kiss their ass? Yeah, that's a losing message. It's a losing message.
I'm not saying that anyone needs to kiss Nala's ass. I'm just saying that as Christians, we cannot make a judgment as to whether or not she has been saved. And it is possible that she has been saved. That's my position on Nala.
That wasn't just your position. Your position in your video was also to attack people like Pearl Davis, who is the only one, was the only one out of you sea of harpies, that's my words, okay, who wasn't kissing this woman's ass. She was the only one who actually didn't get on her knees and kiss this prostitute's ass because she got dunked at heresychurch.com. The only one.
So it sounds like when you say that she just got dunked at heresychurch.com, do you believe that you don't believe that Nala has been saved? Do you believe it's possible that she has been?
Of course, I would not make a claim to the salvation, but what I would say is I would definitely not be attacking creators like Pearl Davis who are pointing out that, hey, you Christians should not be running to embrace this. You Christians should not be running to say that, hey, this is necessarily even a good thing that she's doing the testimony roadshow and look how saved it I am. That is the opposition of the Christian ethic. She was the only one in a whole sea of you women who came after her, who stood her ground and said no. That's respectable.
Specifically said that Jesus isn't going to save these hoes. I think Jesus can save some of them. I think he will save some of them.
Not save them from the consequence of their actions. That's what she means by that. Not that they can't find salvation through Jesus Christ, but that Jesus isn't going to save them from the consequences of their actions. They're not. You can't use Christianity.
You mean in a world like, because obviously if Jesus saves them, it is from the consequences of their actions, their sinfulness on a spiritual level. But you mean
I'm talking about in the world, yes,
dating.
yeah, in the world.
No, I agree.
That's her point.
That's not something I disagree with. Like the idea, and I've said this online. I've said this multiple times. Nala,
what she means is, I'll just frame it the best way I can. Jesus can save these hoes' soul, okay? But men are not going to be able to save these hoes in the world. And women are not going to be able to save these hoes in the world. And it sure would be nice if some of them actually faced the consequences for their actions, were held to account without a what about the Mendo argument from commentators like you, Lauren.
What do you mean, what about the Mendo?
Because what about the Mendo? Every time that we get into these discussions, and we even in this discussion / debate that we're having right now, almost every single time we bring up the female promiscuity issue, you bring it right back to men. You call the men the hoe-makers. You call the men the people who are responsible. You did. You said the red pillars are exacerbating the same issue they rage against. The thing is interesting here is when you're talking about hypergamy, that would actually be in opposition to your point. That's point one. And then point two is that while there are hoe-makers inside of these red pill spaces, most of them are feminists. And most of the debates I do with these red pillars, I prove that they're feminists because they embrace the ethic of destroying patriarchy for the purpose of degeneracy. But it's not a men's problem here. This is a woman's problem.
I very much, I disagree that I don't think that the problem is also amongst women and the women's promiscuity. I've done who knows how many videos at this point talking about promiscuity specifically amongst women, including women who do OnlyFans. I very much believe that this is, I mean, women are the gatekeepers of sex historically. So
that's a red pill talking point.
Yeah, it's a correct talking point.
All of the descriptors are mostly correct. I still haven't actually heard what you've done is conflated red pill with pickup artists. I haven't actually heard a single criticism of the red pill.
So you seem to, when we talk about even like feminists or red pill, you're like, this is specifically what the, like, I guess what the most basic belief structure that each one of them holds. Therefore, anything absent that, that's not really feminism. That's not really red pill.
No, I'm not giving you a no true Scotsman fallacy. I can explain.
Sorry?
You're trying to move into a no true Scotsman fallacy, and that's not what I'm saying.
No. That's not what I'm doing. Let me finish. Okay. So I'm taking the position of this is what the movements exist as. Like the feminist movement. This is what the feminist movement represents. These are what feminists argue for. This is what the red pill movement represents. These are what, and again, like I specifically will talk about people like Pearl Davis because I will fully acknowledge that I don't follow people like Rollo Tomasi, or I'm sure there's other ones who are part of it that I don't follow. Like this is what red pill as a movement has brought.
What has it brought?
Well, I think if we're talking about the red pill movement, there's absolutely the idea and that male promiscuity should be excused or is not as bad as female promiscuity.
And what is your evidence for this?
This is something, well, I'm talking specifically about people like Pearl Davis, like Myron.
No, Pearl Davis nor Myron say this. Here's what they say. They give a descriptor. This is the problem, right? You don't know what you're talking about on these issues. The descriptor, I'm going to tell you the descriptor.
That it's not the same when
it's not, and here's why. The descriptor here is true. Here's the descriptor. The descriptor is that promiscuity in society is not punished by women towards men because of hypergamy. However, it is punished by men towards women, meaning the value set due to our ontology, which is different, right? Women seem to not be as upset by male promiscuity as men get by female promiscuity. This is objectively true. We have all of the data you could possibly imagine proving that this is true. Women seem to not care so much. Now, this could have something to do with the penetrative act, because if you look at homosexuality, for instance, both sides seem to be they have a disgust reaction to this. It could be due to the penetrative nature. I'm not exactly sure why this exists as a descriptive truth, but it is descriptively true. That is their point. Their point is not whether or not this behavior is good for men. Most red pillars say that promiscuity for men is not a good thing, in fact. But that doesn't mean that the descriptive truth that is viewed differently between the sexes isn't true, because it is. It most definitely is.
But then, so you come along and say Pearl actually means XYZ. Let me explain it. This is not what Pearl is saying when she is online, when she is tweeting out. This is a very different thing, and this is where I think Pearl shoots herself in the foot a lot, because I don't know if she's engagement farming to try to like say things in the most provocative way possible. But she does not say that men and women, or she does not just say that, oh, cheating is viewed differently from men as it is women, therefore whatever. She will actually say that it's not a big deal if a man cheats. Like,
No.
just
What happens, and Pearl also clarified this, and I even have the tweets of her clarifying this. She's clarified it a million times. But what happens is, because you have a character limitation, what people do, and it's a leftist game, they take what is said out of context. They portray that as a position of Pearl Davis, even though she's clarified it 100 times. That promiscuity for men is not good. However, it is a more understandable in society because they're not punished for it by women the same way women are punished for it by men. This operates under incentives. That's That's showing you an incentive difference.
But I think she's also, I mean, she's leading her her audience down the wrong path, because you'll have men like Matt Walsh and Michael Knowles who argue for, marriage very strongly.
Yeah, that's right. They argue for secular marriage and have the same contradiction you do, which is why the red pill doesn't take them seriously.
Can I finish?
Yeah, go ahead.
She'll look at someone like Matt Walsh and Michael Knowles and say, like, well, your marriages aren't representative because you are the X%, so you can't translate your experience universally toward men. It's like, okay, but simultaneously she will just say it's not as big of a deal for men to cheat. If you look at a lot of women in their relationships with their husbands, with their boyfriends, they will absolutely think that it is a big deal if they cheat. Now, if you're saying like, oh, well, the top 1%, their wives who might be trophy wives are not going to think it as big of a deal. They're going to turn the other cheek. Well, Pearl is doing the exact same thing that she accuses Matt Walsh and Michael Knowles of doing, trying to apply like the standards for the top 0.1% to the average male in the dating pool or in the marriage pool.
This is insane. This is insane framing, because you want to point out hypocrisy where it doesn't exist. Matt Walsh and the Tradcons suffer from the exact same contradiction that you do, which is to give a green light to secularists to get married, which is degenerate in and of its own nature, is a degenerate, non-sacramental act. It is not a Catholic act. It is not an Orthodox act for secularists to engage in this kind of degeneracy in society and then wrap it up in a bow with a state contract. That's insanity. Not only that, but none of these guys actually are willing to debate the issues with any of these people. Rollo Tomasi, Myron, all of these different red pillars have done a call out to debate with the Daily Wire people on this particular issue, because they're hang on, because they're straw man so heavily, and none of them will do it. Not one. So that tells me, right, at least you could, like, I have some respect for you, at least, Lauren, because you showed up to do the debate. I mean, kudos to you. Great. At least we had it. These guys won't even show up to a debate. We had it all set up with Myron Gaines. We had it all set up on whatever. We've had it set up a dozen times to take these guys to task on their absurd criticisms of what is considered the red pill, and they refuse to even show up. Instead, they go into a smoke-filled cigar room and film each other kissing each other's asses and talking about how great it is that they want secular people to get married. Oh, wow, we've really won the culture war now, Lauren.
Well, I mean, to be fair to them, like, I'm not a Daily Wire employee. I'm not a fan of the Daily Wire as a whole. I like Matt Walsh and Michael Knowles, though. But Andrew Klavan and Michael Knowles have both sat down with Pearl specifically. They have had those conversations. I'm not saying that they shouldn't have further ones.
Yeah, Klavan got destroyed by Pearl Davis, who's not even a good debater. Yeah, I can't even tell you how badly it would go for the Daily Wire guys to have guys like me, who I'm not even a red pillar. I just don't straw man their position. Same thing, Rollo Tomasi, Myron Gaines, all of these guys, they would absolutely obliterate them, and that's why they hide, because they don't have prescriptions to these problems. And that's a big problem if you're out there advocating for Christianity, and what ends up happening is we all look stupid, we get pummeled, these guys in their spaces laugh at us, and I don't blame them.
Do you think that there exists a way for, I guess, there are secular adjustments to marriage that the red pill community would look at and think, you know, you're right, this does change my view of marriage and whether I should get married?
Repeat the question. I want to make sure I get it correct.
So do you think that there are secular changes to civil marriages, and again, I'll say it all the day long. You are right about secular marriages. I have no problems, like,
Yeah, I
W
understand.
for you. You're right. But do you think that there are secular changes that would make secular men more likely to get married? Because if you're saying,
Yeah,
like,
but I don't want them to. I want them to get a sacramental marriage. Why would I try to move society towards degeneracy, to enabling degeneracy? Why would I do that? The truth is written on your heart. It is true that men and women are inclined to become married, but absent the sacrament, right? They're not living in a married lifestyle at all. They just have some bizarre state contract. It's totally meaningless. Why would I move heaven and earth and all of society to reform all of these laws on behalf of these men if they're not even going to go through with a sacrament, have an ecclesiastical authority which can govern their marriage? You're setting them up for failure. Absent that ground-based community, which you only get from the church. You can only get community building from the church. The reason most of these marriages actually fail, and Sexton he's a divorce lawyer. He's very popular all over the internet. Great guy. We've gone rounds and rounds about this. But one of the big keys, and if you read his book, you'll find this out, absent the groundswell community, there's nothing which keeps these marriages together. There's no shame. There's nothing to appeal to. It's just you and her, and that's it. And all of the degeneracy of the world. Why would I move heaven and earth and try to do everything that I could to promote that? I don't want to promote that. I want to move these people out of that and into sacramental marriage so that hopefully, not even hopefully, they will, based on what you and I have already discussed, which is that the more religious you are, the less likely you are to get divorced. That's going to require sacramental marriage. That's the way forward, but that requires patriarchy. I'm not going to move laws around and advocate to move these laws around so that secularists can engage in more degeneracy. That's insane.
okay. And again, the civil marriage thing, I think you're right there. That's something that you've kind of blown my mind on. I don't have a problem admitting that. I think from the Daily Wire perspective, they view it as pragmatically easier to encourage people who are secular to get married, have children within that state wedlock than it is to convert them. And
Yeah,
I think
we could say abortion is more pragmatic because you can get rid of the undesirables in society too if you wanted to. We're not interested as Christians in pragmatic solutions. We're interested as Christians in sacramental solutions and bringing people into the Church of Jesus Christ, the body of Jesus Christ. In order to do that, we need to have a message which can compete with the common sense messaging of the red pill, and they ain't got it. And that's why they get destroyed. And that's why guys like me, the few of us which exist, can go out there and completely dismember both sides of the argument because we actually understand what the arguments are. These are not evil men. They're trying to get by inside of this completely degenerate world. They're looking for a solution like this. Myron would be the first to engage in ecclesiastical authority when it came to marriage and recommend that men go that route. And they know that they're immoral absent Jesus Christ and God. But if you can't offer them a superior message, the red pill is going to beat the holy tar out of you, and that's exactly what they're doing.
Sorry, we'll get to that. We have some more super chats. Lauren is admitting where she's wrong and brought you on her platform. Stop interrupting and show some respect. She names the J. She's good faith. You are not, even if right on this one.
Okay, well, I did request a moderator. Moderators are designed specifically so that there's not over-talking, things like this. I understood that this would be a contentious debate. I requested one. It was Lauren who said no, she did not want a moderator. So you can't put this on me that I'm debating like I always debate. I requested a moderator, so that didn't happen.
We're both adults. I think we can just try to let each other speak and finish our points and, continue in good faith. I still think that's possible. Not giving up on that. Arceon, Andrew's extremely bad faith. Wickeder than thou. Hey, Lauren, this person did not engage in good faith. This was entirely a game of one-upsmanship. His fans in chat also seem very angry and hostile.
Oh, yeah, all 5.1 thousand of them who are live viewing it right now, all of them are hostile. They're all just insane lunatics. Is that really what's going on? Or is it possible that I'm just right?
I don't think this person said that all of your fans are hostile. The McGlone Code. I would love to see Andrew Wilson sit and talk with Pastor Doug Wilson. He's a solid Protestant who's been teaching patriarchy for decades.
Good.
Jacob Mayberry, divorce and premarital sex is extremely low in Mormonism too, and only men can be in the priesthood.
It's true. This is because inside of Mormonism, they have a long-standing tradition under a patriarchal authority. Now, there's other problems with Mormonism, and I'm sure that Lauren Chen will absolutely agree with me on that. Huge problems within Mormonism, but the reason that you see this applied and you see less of what you would consider degeneracy in the world coming out of that church is because there's some kind of patriarchal structure which still exists there.
Thunderstorm, the divorce rate is extremely low for white couples being a first marriage. Eastern Orthodoxy has a huge flaw because it allowed Bolsheviks/feminism to arise in Russia, plus IQ doesn't equal clever.
Nonsense. What ended up happening there, it was not that the Bolsheviks killed the Orthodox hierarchy inside of Russia. They killed them. They murdered them. They murdered his entire family. And to this day, communism is anathematized by the Orthodox Church. You cannot be a communist and be Orthodox. You will be drove right out of the church. It is not allowed. That's a bullshit claim.
Sorry, this is the current one. The red pill is a joke made by weak men for weak men. This dude is a snake. Jesus gave 2 commandments: love your neighbor, love God. Jesus up to stop an adulteress being stoned. Who is this?
It sounds like you think there's a 3rd commandment, which is be a sissy. And that's what's going on, is that you have completely and totally rolled over for a gynocentric worldview inside of the nation, which is promptly rejected by these descriptive truths by the red pillars, and Christians should be ready, arms open, to swoop these people up inside of the patriarchy and ecclesiastical authority. You have the 3rd commandment of be nice. You see a woman who's uncomfortable and it makes you uncomfortable. That's part of the gynocentrism that you're dealing with. You are what we like to call a simp, sir.
Ace Montana, OF as a company peaked and is starting to downslide. Follow the money. Nala probably had an accountant say now's a good time to get out. Nagwal, 1992, he's lying. Myron always supports.
Yeah, well, why don't you go watch me tangle with him on this issue on the Fresh and Fit podcast? Also, that was the #1 rated by polling podcast that they've ever done, me on there tangling with him and with the girls afterwards. So I can give you firsthand direct knowledge that that's not true because he told it to my face. So you don't know what the hell you're talking about. Like most of you people, you don't even take the time to actually understand these issues. To me, it's disgusting and disingenuous, and I'd actually like to see you guys engage. I'd like to see the Daily Wire guys engage. I'd like to see everybody stop hiding under their little rocks.
When it comes to Myron and the Fresh and Fit guys specifically, you're saying that they don't support degeneracy, the sleeping around, or anything like that?
I'm saying that they're looking for any alternative to the degeneracy in the world. And what they have not found is good solutions from Christians to this, or they would be more inclined to follow those solutions. Are both Myron and Walter degenerates? Yeah, I've told that to their face. They both know. But they've both rejected the moral framework of religion, one Muslim, one Christian, because they feel that the solutions are nonsensical. And the thing is they don't have to be. We can come at these people with solutions which are not nonsensical and move them away from these paths. We can do that.
Well, and I think so. You've I think admitted yourself what a lot of these problems or these people's problems with the red pill seem to be. It's kind of like we could also look at the OnlyFans girls and say, yeah, they've identified a market, and like it is a problem. They're looking for someone to take care of them who is a man, but they're not doing it right. But it doesn't change the fact that what they are doing, it is degenerate and it is enabling degeneracy.
Well, you can complain about it, but until you offer an actual solution, an alternative solution to just go and sin as much as you possibly can, we'll just call it something else other than a sacrament. That's not a solution. It's not a solution to not give them a patriarchal ecclesiastical authority that will actually make women behave. It's not a solution for you to just say, oh, but you're degenerate, so therefore dismissed. That's why they get more and more popular every single year, while the tradcons are losing ground on every single front. We cannot afford...
What would you say specifically as a trad? Like, what does that mean? Because I've seen people refer to being as tradcon as Sydney Watson, who is a liberal atheist, as well as someone like Matt Walsh, who is a Catholic, who is a father, who is right wing. So, I mean, is it just a dichotomy? You're either kind of like tradcon or red pill?
Nope. Oh, I mean, kind of. So let me give a little bit of ground here. TradCon is essentially meaningless. It's a reference point for people who are red pill advocates to point out this is a grouping of ex-Christians, or not ex-Christians, but X amount of Christians who believe in X. That's all that they mean when they say TradCon. Ultimately, it's a somewhat empty label. But when I make the reference for TradCon, I think you understand who it is that I'm talking about. If you don't, you want it more clarified, they would consider guys who are inside of like the Daily Wire, the Charlie Kirk Zone, people like this, to be inside of this kind of overarching TradCon field. Andrew Klavan would be a perfect example of this, completely dismembered by Pearl Davis. She barely even had to try because, again, his solutions were a joke. From the Christian end, the solutions from the red pill side that they hear coming out of Christianity are a joke. It's lost its teeth. And it's lost its teeth because of the poor positioning and advocacy of the people who go against the red pill. That's why guys like me are popular in those spaces, and that's why most people are not, because they cannot contend. They just straw man.
Well, I think so I watched the Andrew Klavan with Pearl Davis, and I've also seen the criticisms of people specifically like Charlie Kirk. And I think Charlie Kirk, absolutely, he is a strong Christian himself. He would be the first person to say you should come to Christ. But when he's talking about something like marriage, I don't think he fully understands the legal risks that a secular man is looking at, right? Because he went viral for a clip where he says get married as young as possible. I mean, I think a lot of young guys look at that and they think this is ridiculous. You're basically just asking me to tie myself to someone who I'm gonna be with before I make all of my money, and then when she leaves me, she'll just be that much more likely to actually get a piece of it because it's wealth that was earned. I don't agree with Charlie's messaging on that. I think that was problematic. I think that was an L in a situation where we have so many young men who are saying these are my concerns with marriage, to say just do it anyway. That is not a solution.
No, it's not a solution. And the Kirk method was a failure from the beginning. All right. A bunch of anonymous frogs were able to completely dismantle his messaging in front of the world. And this was more of the big tent, right-wing, solution-based nonsense. We have to hold our ground. These people are not reproducing. We can actually win this war long term. Just like the churches of old sometimes were cross-generationally built, we have the same exact thing in front of us. We can cross-generationally build back a patriarchal structure, and you can give men a mission and they will follow it to the letter. And what's going on right now with the reproduction crisis is actually an opportunity for us, because it's the secularists who are refusing to reproduce. And every single year, the number is going down where the more traditionals are reproducing. We can ultimately win this fight, but we can't do it with poor messaging. If we just end up with these atheist making factories, which is these Protestant churches, many of them are doing. I'm not saying all. There's some traditional Protestant churches, and there's a lot of base Protestants. But unfortunately, most of what Protestantism has become is an atheist creating machine. It churns them out like nobody's business. And if we don't have good messaging here, Lauren, if we're not willing to really engage with what these guys are saying, we're going to lose.
Well, then when it comes to, so someone says, Lauren's secular allies are bad, Andrew's secular allies are good. You're obviously very keen on debating, talking about the ideas. That's fine. I don't agree with an organization, I'll say it, like TPUSA, that I am affiliated with, taking, for example, a gay man and being like, this is the face of conservatism. I view that as very different than sitting down with someone, explaining my positions, and then, hey, at the end of the day, they admit that I am right. There's a difference there.
What's the difference?
Kind of referring to the peaceful Latinas. And it seems like
What's the
you're
difference?
the difference is one of them, the leftist, the progressive, the secularist, you name it, is agreeing that your position is right on a certain issue. In the other camp, it's you lifting them up just in general as, hey, this is someone who is representative of what I want the movement to be.
There are truths in the world which can be offered up by secularists, which are no less true just because it's a secularist offering it up. To say, right, though, that in any way, shape, or form that Andrew Wilson embraces degeneracy is absolutely insane. Nobody has pushed back in this space more on that and more with the creators. Unlike you, I don't have interviews with Destiny where I kiss his ass. Instead, I debate him 7, 8 times in a row till I'm on a blacklist, because I will continuously take these people on and their ideology on. And it doesn't matter who they are. My ideology is better. It's more sound. It has a much better grounding. I'm going to go into the lion's den where they are and take them on where they're at. And I do this every single day, all day long. That's all I do. What I see instead is this kind of unification, the Kirk-style unification with with these particular degens. That's what you're talking about with the Latinas for whatever. I know who those two chicks are. They're dumb as a box of rocks, right? They are not good advocates for your positions at all, Lauren. Ultimately, though, these secularists, if we want to swoop these red pillars up, if we want to move them over to the body of Christ, the only way that we can do that is to go into their spaces and destroy their ideology. And thus far, the Daily Wire guys have been too terrified to do that. That's what's actually happened.
Well, I mean, I disagree that I can't have someone like Destiny on and we have a discussion about. I think we were talking about I asked him stuff about OnlyFans. We just had a discussion like I've had with, Brianna Wu, and it's usually,
I understand, usually a good time. But when I had a discussion with Brianna Wu blacklisted me immediately because I destroyed Brianna Wu so bad on a gun control debate. And Brianna was so humiliated that the guy took to the internet and went crazy on the internet about it for, 4, 5, 6 days, tried to get me blacklisted off the internet just because of how badly I destroyed Brianna's ideology. When you move over to the Destiny front, no, it's okay for you to have a conversation with Destiny, right? But where was Lauren saying, hey, Destiny, letting other dudes jizz all over your chick's face? That's degenerate and disgusting. Why are you letting your wife go out and get fucked by everything on planet Earth, you gross Coomer gremlin? Where's Lauren Chen at the front line saying, you disgusting fucking heathen? Nowhere.
Before we went on the stream, you specifically said you don't feel the need to bring up personal stuff unless the other person brings it up first. And that's kind of the stance that I take as well. Like, I can talk to Destiny about his ideas.
With potential allies, that's true. The Coomer Gremlin is not ever going to be your friend. The Coomer Gremlin will deplatform you in 15 seconds if he thinks it will in any way, shape, or form boost his audience numbers. He'll go to war with you tomorrow if he thinks it's prudent to his messaging. He doesn't give a shit about you. There's no particularly good reason I can ascertain why you didn't go, hey, dude, why are you letting your wife get fucked by everything that moves, you gross bastard? Why are you advocating the most degenerate message possible?
There are a lot of people who follow